Welcome into the DNVR Rockies podcast brought to you by DraftKings Sportsbook. New customers, when you download the DraftKings Sportsbook app, all you got to do is bet $5 on any college team to win, and you're going to get $200 in free bets instantly, win or lose. That's with promo code DNVR only on DraftKings Sportsbook. I'm your host, Patrick Lyons, and joining me today, as he does each and every week, the voice of the Colorado Rockies for AT&T Sportsnet, the host of the Drew Goodman podcast. It's Drew Goodman. How you doing this week, buddy?
Good, doing well. Long road trip of which we're right in the smack in the middle, I guess, right?
That's it. Has the humidity been? This has been the humidity tour with New York, Atlanta, Cincinnati. Has it been okay? I haven't heard too many people complaining.
No, it's bad. It hasn't been bad. I thought New York was beautiful. We always talk about running. You and I both like to run. You sweat a lot. I wring out my gear after and hang it up, but it wasn't brutal, believe me, not even close. In fact, even Atlanta's been nice. I just got back a little while ago. It's been good.
That's a blessing. Yeah, it's
in fact, last night during the game, it was because there were some late afternoon showers, and it was 73 degrees at game time. It was
wow.
At one point, I even contemplating putting on not an overcoat, you know what I mean, like a pullover kind of thing. So, no, it hadn't been bad.
That's pretty good. I like hearing that. It's fortunate weather, fortunate play by the Rockies. They've won 2 in a row against Max Scherzer, Max Fried. Safe to say, I don't think we need our buddy Doug Marino to jump in here, and I don't need to use the internet. First time the Rockies have ever won back-to-back games against 2 guys named Max, who will also probably get votes for the NL Cy Young Award this year. Safe to say that's a true fun.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't really put together the Maxes. I wasn't focused on that, but more importantly, 2 one-run games against 2 guys, as you suggest, are going to receive Cy Young votes. 2 guys who've been outstanding this year. So yeah, good wins again. And forget just the fact that they were able to win one-run games, low-scoring games, as you'd expect with a Scherzer and a Fried on the mound, but against 2 of the best teams in baseball. They had to shut down, the Mets offense. They had to, and Herman was terrific the other day. And then they had to shut down an Atlanta Braves offense, which is terrific. And Urania, and the way the thing started, you thought it was going to be pretty ugly again, and it wasn't. And then the bullpen, 4 innings of shutout baseball, just 1 hit allowed. So, yeah, it's amazing. When you pitch well, you have a real good chance at winning. Isn't that a novel concept?
That's very true, especially on the road, too, where a couple of runs might be all you get, but it could be enough. Yeah, so much to break down, it feels like, from these 2 victories and contributions coming from all over the place. I mean, you got 2 innings out of Justin Lawrence last night, which he's been a really great surprise. Your guest on last week's Drew Goodman podcast, Carlos Estevez, now sees his ERA down in the mid-3s after a lot of really good outings. He stepped in there as that 8th inning guy with Colome on the IL. He's now back, but Estevez has been big. As you pointed out, the bullpen was really, really good last night in those final 4 frames.
They were, and everything for me, or I don't want to say everything, but a good portion of how I view things, and I think how you view things too, is, okay, how are the Rockies going to get better? Who is going to be a participant in the Rockies increasing significantly their win total in the not too distant future? I mean, this year, it's done. So they're going to play another 32 games or whatever it is that's left. And it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of it. It's going to be a bad year. The Rockies are going to, finish with a bad record. We know all those things. But who's part of the solution? Well, Justin Lawrence is a guy with really good stuff and is now being pushed into, and some by performance and also some by the, attrition, is being pushed into a situation where he's asked to protect some leads. The stuff, as I said, really good. I'll share with you a story I may have already passed along. I can't remember if it was your podcast or mine. That Dave Roberts had told me. He said he had asked me about Justin Lawrence. He said, guys in our dugout hate when he comes in. So what's that tell you? The vaunted Dodgers don't like seeing Lawrence, which means the stuff again is really good. And so last night we saw him for 2 innings and two really good innings, two really strong innings. So that's a positive because you look forward and you go, okay, he can be part of protecting leads, down the road going forward. So that's one of the things I took away from last night.
And protect those leads for many, many years to come. Still has a long way until free agency.
Yeah, I,
He's
I
almost
yeah,
low key. Go ahead. Yeah,
I real quick, Patrick. I don't mean to interrupt, but I go year to year with relievers. I don't.
sure.
I don't start to look. He's not Mike Trout. He's not the Mike Trout of relievers. I hope you're right, dude. I hope. I hope you're right. Yeah, he's controllable for a long time, but we know relievers. How many of them are truly remain? Forget elite, remain really good for, year after year after year. The old line about relievers, good yet one year, not so good the next year, good the next. So right now, next year, you could see where he could be a nice piece, in the seventh or eighth inning, potentially. I
Yeah.
ain't going beyond that. And it's not a knock on Justin Lawrence. Great
Right.
kid, good stuff, all those things. But I mean, to suggest 3, 4, 5 years ago, in that from now, he's your closer. Maybe I don't know, but I take small steps with relievers.
It's true. Yeah, just wrote about a conversation with Adam Ottavino and how he's had this very, very long career, a guy who started out in the bullpen for the Rockies. But then, to your point, Philip Deal, who's now at the Mets, but Philip Deal, hey, looked good there for a minute, but it's really hard. You can't have that same trajectory, like you said, with so many position players. But Lawrence is one of those young players that could be here with the Rockies going on down the line. And so thus we transition to kind of the next generation of Rockies superstars and Rockies players who are going to contribute to the team. And we saw that last night in the major league debut of Michael Toglia. Did you get a chance to talk with him a little bit before the game? See that glint in his eye? He's a big kid, so he doesn't look like a child there, but he did have this childish look on his face of like, oh gosh, my boyhood dreams are coming true.
Well, I did talk to him in the clubhouse for a while before the game. I didn't want to spend a ton of time. I mean, he's preparing, and I've talked to him before, as I know you have, Patrick, and he's a really nice young man. He really is, and I think your description is apt. He not quite baby face, but it's a young face on a giant, young man. I mean, he's 6'5" and 240 pounds and nimble, moves well around the bag, runs better than you think. He stole some bases in the minor leagues this year. He was ecstatic as he should be, and I love when a player makes his debut and we get to shoot, mom and dad and, brothers and sisters and aunts and uncles and coaches. And, we had one recently, which was fabulous with Winton Bernard. And, earlier in the year, Sean Bouchard came up. It's great to see Bouchard get his first big league hit, especially after getting robbed in his first at bat by Vaughn Grissom. But yeah, I mean, seeing Michael Toglia, and it has a little more potential cachet in that he's one of their top prospects. He's a former number one pick, and he's expected to get to the big leagues, and he's expected to do well. And it may be unfair to say, well, let's see him do well immediately from Jump Street, but he's a guy. I mean, guys get called up. I mean, Winton Bernard is a beautiful story, a wonderful story. And what I'm about to say is not to take anything away from his story. But at 31, almost 32, he's not looked upon by the Rockies as a prospect, as somebody that is going to be, part of the solution. Now, if he can continue to grow and somehow be, a piece, a complimentary piece, awesome. I hope that for him. I love that kid, man. I've gotten to know him over the last few weeks. You can't do anything but root for him. But Michael Toglia, Patrick, he's supposed to be a guy. He's supposed to be a guy that plays every day and hits, somewhere in the middle of your order. And yesterday was day one of what you hope is a long and fruitful career.
So, and I know you've seen him before Tuesday night in Atlanta, but do you get Jim Tomei vibes? Like just with the size, the way he hits when he's up from the left side, I feel like there's some body comp. I don't necessarily think Toglia is going to be hitting 500 home runs. I think he's a
That's
little
just
more
not,
nimble
it's
than
not.
Tomei, but otherwise, I'm seeing some comparisons.
Okay, you're beautiful, man. I love you. Um, I I hope he has half the career that Jim Thome had because Thome hit 600 homers, didn't he?
He did.
Right? 600 and some odd, which means he'd hit 300 homers. If you and I are
That's a
doing
lot.
this podcast, 15 years from now, and remember that conversation you and I had? Totally is. He just hit his 300th last night. Isn't that cool? Switch hitting first baseman hit 300 homers, and he's got 3 Gold Gloves in his career. I mean, that'd be awesome. That would be one hell of a career. So that's why I was shaking my head. Jim told me he's a big, strong guy. He hits from both sides of the plate. So, you gravitate toward, big guys that switch hit. I know, Mark Teixeira's name came up last night. This kid's been a big leaguer for 10 minutes. No, he ain't even been. He's been a big leaguer for 8 seconds. Let's let him develop, hopefully, and see what happens as this thing unfolds. But he's a really nice young man who's got gifts. He's got power on both sides. You look at his minor league numbers, Patrick. Even this year in the Eastern League, which is not an easy league at all.
No.
He hit in the 230s. Hit homers, 23 homers. So he got elevated to Albuquerque. Albuquerque, little small snippet, good place to hit. He went off 7 home runs, 17 ribbies in 17 games, hit 333. Awesome. Got the call up. Tremendous. Now you're facing the best pitching in the world. So let's just let this thing take its natural course day to day.
Yeah, he talked a little bit post game about some of the off speed pitches he saw. I think first pitch was curveball from Freed, and it was like, ooh, okay, yep, we're in the majors here, but still stay within yourself. This is still the same game that I've been playing my entire life. And so you're right. Yes, you can't expect him to go out and be a future Hall of Famer like a Jim Thome immediately. I mean, think back to Ryan Feltner last year. Obviously, got called up in September for a couple starts, kind of get his feet wet a little bit. We're seeing him make some growth this year in the majors. Toglia, maybe that growth comes a little bit quicker, but still, it is a process to eventually become that finished product that he very well could become. And as we said, really get the train moving here with these prospects that are going to be coming up, and could be just a real perfect confluence of the veterans, the McMahon, the Bryant, Charlie Blackmon for another year, but the pitchers and Freeland and Senzatella that are going to be around going forward. And these young guys, it could be, it has a lot of Rockies fans excited for what the future could possibly hold. The future's not here yet, but you know what? It's starting to show up, and totally, I think, is that first domino, which has been exciting.
I agree with you, and I wish, and sort of the Rockies, most notably, wish that Ezekiel Tovar, didn't get hurt and has been rehabbing for a couple of months because they had hoped that he, would be here right now. And I was reading a piece in USA Today about, I think it's Corbin Carroll, one of the top prospects in all of baseball, who was just brought up by Arizona, got a double in his first big league game, and when you're a team that's playing out the string, as the Arizona Diamondbacks are, as the Colorado Rockies are, you want to be able to, the ardent fans want to be able to hang their hat on something and get a glimpse into what will help turn them around. So Arizona, has some young players that they've been playing quite a few young players. Now the Rockies are starting to, filter in the Toglia. We'll see if Tovar, is healthy enough to arrive and get a cup of coffee this year in September. But yeah, those are the things that get me excited. The position player area, the Rockies have some guys, that are going to be here, a little bit this year, as we talked about, next year and in the following year, that potentially really get you excited. The other piece, and the most important piece, is pitching, and that lags behind. And you win with pitching. So we'll see how it continues to unfold. But to your original point, yeah, when a Toglia comes up, man, I'm excited. I want to see what it looks like.
Yeah, it's great that the Rockies are getting on the prospect season hype here because, as you said, Corbin Carroll, those 5 RBI in his first 2 games. Arizona, the third place Arizona Diamondbacks now. You got the Orioles there, only a couple games out of the wild card or 6 games over 500. They just announced on Wednesday one of their top prospects, in fact, top prospect, 21-year-old shortstop Gunnar Henderson's coming up. So it's great, to see these young guys coming up. The Rockies getting in the mix on that. Now, I got a question for you. I want you to think about it here for a second. With Toglia in the lineup, Bouchard there hitting behind him. Jake Bird was warming up at one point. I think when Estevez got into a bit of a jam, we could have seen 3 players from UCLA who did actually play together. But can you remember a time in which you had at least 2 homegrown guys from the same college, probably not high school, but it would probably be, a university that they went to for the Rockies together at the same time? And while you think of that, think about how great the DNVR bar is going to be. We're opening back up on September 9th. We're going to have the big bash opening back up just in time for Broncos. With a membership, only 50 cents for your first month. You get discounts and price breaks on the tailgates. You get that member-sized beer, and your annual membership gets you a free shirt from DNVRlocker.com. Breckenridge Brewery, they're doing some great things as well because they've got a birthday coming up. It's 32 years for Breckenridge Brewery. Can you believe it? Celebrate with a weekend-long hootenanny. Kick off the fall with live music, food, and beer, of course. October 8th and 9th at their Littleton location. They've got national acts like Spin Doctors and local favorites Railroad Earth rocking out. So stay tuned to everything DNVR for hootenanny giveaways leading up to October 8th. Check out the events.seated.com/hootenanny22 for more details on tickets and artist lineup. Again, events.seated.com/hootenanny22. Link is in the description. And DraftKings Sportsbook, the wait is almost over. Football season is about to begin. NFL Week 1 action starts with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Celebrate the return of football. DraftKings is giving you and new customers a can't-miss offer. You bet $5 on any game, you get $200 in free bets instantly. You want more action for opening night? Well, everyone, you can experience the thrill of DraftKings early win promotion. Get up 7. That's right, 7-point lead. You win. That's all you need to do. Bet on any NFL team of your choice, and if your team gets a lead by 7 points, at any point during the game, you get paid instantly, even if your team ends up losing. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code DNVR to get $200 in free bets instantly when you place a $5 bet on any football game. That's code DNVR only at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Must be 21 or older, Colorado only. Bonus issued as free bets. 1 early win token issued at opt-in. Moneyline bets only. Deposit and wagering restrictions apply. Eligibility and terms at DraftKings.com/football terms. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-522-4700. 2 Bears on the field last night. Can you recall something like that before for the Rockies?
Say it again.
How unique. Two Bruins. You had two
Bruins.
UCLA Bruins. It's a good trivia question, huh?
Well, with just one school?
Yeah, that's pretty rare. I mean, I don't think anyone else from Tennessee with Todd Helton, right?
Well, there's been some Long Beach guys, but never overlapping. Hampson's a Long Beach guy. Tulowitzki, famously a Long Beach State guy. Probably you'd have to find one of those bullpen guys that was with the Rockies for a few months or maybe a year, and you forgot that they went to, a school that one of the position players had gone to. Pat Valleca and Garrett Atkins were both UCLA guys. They didn't overlap. I'm trying to think. Arizona State. You start thinking about the kind of the powerhouses.
Right.
It was interesting. The Rockies were playing, I forget what team it was recently, and they had 2 guys. What team is it? They're 2 pitchers from Fordham. You had to hear me talking about this, Patrick, because Fordham, has only had a few guys that have ever played big league baseball. My dad went to law school there, and so I'm very familiar with Fordham University. And anyhow, there's 2 pitchers, and they both play for the same team. We'll have to check that one.
Nick
Nick
Martinez, maybe
Martinez. Who's he with?
with the Padres.
Okay, so it's the Padres. The Padres have 2 guys from Fordham,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that was
Go
unique.
figure.
And they had two guys from Denver and uh, Steven Wilson, and well, they did have Tyler Rogers there too.
And
So
they on the injured list they have Pierce Johnson. They had 3 guys.
that's right.
They had 3
That's
guys.
right. Yeah, Pierce has been banged up.
Yeah. God, you got me thinking now. On
Usually
this.
it's the off season. I hit you with these crazy
Yeah.
trivia questions here, but that's a good one to possibly look up. And again, because if you're doing homegrown, I feel like that'll be like easier to do. But you're right. Like a guy just comes in for a minute, then that'll throw a wrench in the works. But
Yeah, I mean, like real quick, not to go down this rabbit hole too far. Like think of the current Rockies that went to college. Charlie Blackman, I can't think of the last Georgia Tech guy other than Charlie, at least off the top of my head. And sometimes you lose when it comes to those relief pitchers. Sam Hilliard, Wichita State. I know Sam just got sent out, but C.J. Crone, Utah.
That's rare.
Yeah, and then you got guys you like McMahon had committed to SC, but he came out of high school.
Yeah, that's going to cut down your
Brendan Rodgers committed to Florida State, but he went out of high school. The Brian Servin, Arizona State. There's got to be some other Arizona State guys at some point, but none that I'm aware of currently. So right now it's that whole UCLA connection.
Yeah. See,
Daniel Bard, North Carolina.
Okay.
But no one else currently from North Carolina, right?
No. I mean, was Matt Holliday set to go to Oklahoma State?
Oh, absolutely.
So, all right, he could have maybe played with Jeff Salazar there for a minute, although Salazar was a little bit before that time.
Yeah. I mean, I think of my partners. Wyoming doesn't play baseball anymore, and obviously Huey didn't play for the Rockies. Spilly, UCSB. I can't remember anybody else from UCSB. And, Corey went to Wake Forest. I can't think anybody from Wake Forest. So
yeah, it could be first, at least for the homegrown guys.
Yeah,
that's very much a possibility on that front. Yeah, that's interesting to think about. Yeah, a lot of different areas to go in here with the Rockies. I mean, how much of a surprise? How great was it for you to observe kind of secondhand, third hand, even the Rockies players enjoying seeing all the Mets old timers there over the weekend at Citi Field? Because I think so many people look at them as like, man, these guys are at the peak. They're at the pinnacle. They're at the top of the food chain, but they don't exactly see themselves in that manner. They weren't always at the top. There was a time where they were in the middle or the bottom of the food chain, and there were guys that were at the top, and they got to see those players, the Mike Piazzas, Keith Hernandez, etc. And that inner child definitely seemed to have come out of them this past weekend.
I was very pleased to see a lot of guys took it in, and I'm going to talk a fair amount about it on my podcast that'll come out tomorrow. Kyle Freeland is my guest this week, and Freeland was pitching that night, as you well know, Patrick, and you also know that starting pitchers, especially intense ones, is you don't visit with them, and it's kind of hands off, and they're off in their own world and thoughts, and they're not standing in the dugout 2 hours before they're going to pitch watching stuff go on the field. Kyle Freeland was not only, he didn't just pop up for 3 or 4 minutes, he took it all in. And I was pleased, as I said, to see a number of guys take in what was transpiring on the field. And the vast majority of the players that were there for the Mets celebrating Old Timers Day, they didn't see play unless it was on a video, or maybe they had heard of their names, certainly with the Hall of Famers, Pedro Martinez and Mike Piazza, and, they're prominent names there, Al Leiter. But, then you go back with like the Felix Mians and the Art Shamskys and the Ed Cranepools from 1969. And I can't imagine that any of those names resonated with today's players. And it's not a knock on today's players, but I applaud, the Rockies, and I'm sure on the far side, the current Mets were taking it in because they're appreciative of the guys that came before them, and they're appreciative of guys that could perform long enough to have not only individual accomplishments but collective accomplishments. And in the case of having an old timers day in New York with the Mets covering 60 years, it covers the Miracle Mets naturally of 69. That will go down, forgive my bias, as one of the storied World Series champions of all time because of how bad they were, and that they were, in 62, they were, a first-year franchise, an expansion franchise. And then, of course, the 86 Mets, which, were an infamous bunch as well because they won 108 games during the regular season. They truly were a great, great team. Nearly were done, and then there was the error. And then, as we learned in the aftermath, and Jeff Pearlman's wonderful book chronicling, the bad guys won, they're one of the most famous World Series championship teams. And I think many of those names guys were familiar with that were currently, standing and watching as they prepared for their games. So it was special, man. It really was.
I hadn't thought about the Kyle Freeland business there. Yeah, that was his start, and yet he was going out there and absorbing all that, and Masons versus the Miracles, and the big surprise, Willie Mays, got his number retired, their number 24, which obviously most people don't think of him as a New York Met, and they really shouldn't. And I think a lot of Mets fans might not even necessarily think of him entirely like that, but he was there for parts of 2 seasons for something like 120 some games, but yet still had an importance. And there was a promise made to a degree that his number would be retired. And so I thought, I sort of said, okay, well, again, how does this relate to the Rockies? And it made me think, well, maybe Don Baylor's that guy. I think Don Baylor's contributed a lot more towards the Rockies than what Willie Mays did for the Mets. But Mays, obviously the marquee name, and brought some stature to the Metropolitans there. But if anyone was going to get a surprise number retirement ceremony, I would think and hope that for the Rockies, it would be a guy like Don Baylor, where, if you don't know the history very well, that might surprise you a bit.
Patrick, I love that call. I love the analogy you just made. Like, who could have their number retired where everybody went, whoa, I never saw that one coming. And then as they let it settle in, say, hey, I'm good with that, man. I think that's apropos. And I without thinking in depth about it, because I had not, made the analogy, how would it play out if the Rockies were to do something that, caught everybody by surprise, in that vein, a number retirement. I think that would be, a really interesting one, because he was the first manager. And it was not a tenure without accomplishment at the time in '95 when the Rockies were a wild card team. That was the fastest an expansion team had ever gotten to the postseason. So Baylor had success as a manager of a fledgling franchise, and so universally respected. Came back years later as a hitting instructor, and I guess part of his story is the tragedy that, we lost Donnie, at a young age, by today's standards, certainly. Right. So I love that, that thought. I really do. And I would not, sometimes a guy's number is retired and it is, controversial a little bit, or people feel like it's a reach. And I'm going to bring up a couple, and I say this not to in any way slight their accomplishments or their importance at the time to a franchise, but there's some people in the Ring of Fame, with the Broncos early on, that you look back now and say, okay, was that a little bit of a force because you were trying to create tradition, trying to create a quick history of a franchise, and I think the standard has risen, so there may be some players. Not, and I'll just leave those out. You can probably look up there yourself and say, yeah, nice player, but really, 3 or 4 years, and boom, they're in the Ring of Fame. But I think the Broncos then were trying to create, a history. And I think if you looked at those guys' resumes, some of them, and fast forward to today and say, would that get you in the Ring of Fame? You know, unequivocally say no. I look at, real quick, with the Avalanche when Raymond Bourque had his number retired.
That's a good
Everybody
one.
loved Raymond Bourque, and it was a fabulous move by Pierre Lacroix to get Bourque from Boston, where he's a legend, and get him to Denver, and certainly help get the Avalanche over the top for that cup, and get Raymond Bourque a cup, right? But he got his jersey retired, his sweater, his Avalanche sweater retired, and he played what, 2 years, less than 2 years, and a year and a half or whatever it was, in an Avalanche sweater. I don't care. It's great. I remember the story and remember it fondly, and I know what a class act and what an unbelievable player Raymond Bourque was, even in the latter part of his career. But people go, wait a second, and it raised an eyebrow. So, me, I can get off on a tangent. I really like what you did there, Patrick. And if one day, Dick Monfort is standing around the pitcher's mound, and there's a the canvas out there of some kind, and there's it's covered, and all of a sudden they unveil 25. Boy, I'd stand and applaud, because I think Don Baylor did mean a lot to the foundation of this franchise.
Yeah, no, you make great points. I mean, Bork and Mays kind of have that similarity as far as the marquee name, but it wasn't around very much. Connection between the name and the number, like there's a lot of symbolism and symmetry in that as well.
Yeah, and where even that is a little bit unfair to Mays for me, Patrick, and you and I are both, grew up in the New York metropolitan area, is that Willie Mays he's from Alabama, but Willie Mays became a New York icon playing for the New York Giants. And then the Giants, in 58 were on the West Coast all of a sudden. Willie Mays came up in 1951. Willie Mays became great in New York. And then, yeah, he played in San Francisco for a number of years. The Mets brought him back. Ray Bourque had no connection to Colorado.
This is true. This is true. I'm very much for those building blocks of the Hall of Fame, because I think if you don't do that, then you might not have a Hall of Fame. And so I'd rather err on that side of like, again, it's the hall, small hall versus a big hall. Sometimes small halls don't exist because they're too small, so it's not worth the effort. Give me a big hall. I don't care. Let's put everybody in. We just want to see one for the Rockies. I think that would be tons of fun. And again, as you said, like with Don Baylor, I think once people really start digging into it, you realize, shoot, you know what? We weren't paying attention to Joe Kennedy. This guy he could spin it, man. He had a fantastic season. Gabe White, holy smokes. All right. I had season tickets and I barely remember this guy, but look at his numbers. He was really good. Cool. Let's bring him back and share some of those stories. I think it could be a lot of fun, much like the Drew Goodman podcast this week, because you always have fun. But I have a feeling you're having a little extra pep in your step here, going back home to New York, and talking with Freeland too after that matchup against fellow Coloradan David Peterson. I thought it was a pretty cool weekend. I thought I was a little jealous there.
Yeah, one of the great treats and privileges that we have to do what we do, Patrick, and you travel some, and we're out on the road, and you never know, because we're baseball fans at heart. Yeah, we want to see the Rockies do well. I work for the entity that covers, on television, the Rockies every single day. I desperately want the Rockies to succeed. But in addition, we're baseball fans, man. We're sports fans. So when something great happens, even though that person may wear a different uniform, we can stand back and appreciate it. And when you are in a ballpark and they're celebrating somebody that did something, or having an old timers day, in this case with the Mets, or when you're in Detroit and the great Miguel Cabrera produces his 3,000th hit, and yeah, it came against the Rockies. So what? I'm thrilled that I can say I was there, just like I can say I was there and behind the mic, though it's not going to be my call attached to it, obviously. When Craig Biggio went 5 for 5 and produced his 3,000th hit against the Rockies, when Ichiro had his 3,000th hit, when Barry Bonds hit his, as controversial as he may be, hit his 715th home run against Byung-Hyun Kim over the center field wall at then AT&T Park in San Francisco. So all that matters. It's a wonderful thrill and privilege to, travel around and sometimes be, witness to really memorable things. And I was struck by what Howie Rose said. And I'll talk about this on my podcast. Howie Rose, a longtime radio voice, as you know, Patrick, of the Mets, and he said, I've done World Series games and NLCS championship series games, and seen huge moments, and being there and narrating the old timers game and introducing all those players, it was like the biggest thrill of his career. And that kind of spoke to how impactful it was for followers of the Mets, certainly, but I think also for those that are baseball fans in general.
That's amazing, and it's fitting that it's amazing, this conversation about the Mets and everything. So that's fantastic. Yeah, well, listener number one, that's it. Once you start printing up cards for all of the folks that subscribe to the Drew Goodman podcast, please make sure that I get number one.
You are every week, and Patrick, you're gonna. I know, because you know him. And one of the great things about, Kyle's been on before, naturally, on the podcast, and he probably comes on once a year, because I don't want to overdo it. But I love having conversations with Kyle because he's smart. He brings that intensity and honesty to every answer of a question he's going to give. It's not a cliche. He has a burning desire to win as a club. He cares greatly, as we all know, about the city of Denver and the state of Colorado and the region that he calls home. So he's candid on a lot of topics this week. And, if you're a fan of Kyle, you're a fan of the Rockies, or a fan of baseball, you'll definitely want to enjoy this one in particular.
Yeah. You're gonna get a big uptick there with the hometown guy. Got to make sure you're supporting him, supporting the Drew Goodman podcast, dropping every Thursday. Subscribe to that. Follow him on Twitter at Drew Goodman 42. I'm at Patrick D. Lyons on Twitter. Of course, make sure you're following Susie Hunter at the Susie Hunter, and our main account at DNVR_Rockies. Good, appreciate you coming on today. But look, you know what they say about momentum. It's only as good as your next show. So we'll talk to you then.